Hello lovely language learners, it's MORKSENSEI. Today's video is the first of a series on strategies for taking the TOEIC exam. I won't be teaching you any specific skills, but instead I'll give you some tips for how to prepare, study, and practice for the actual test. While this series is specifically for the TOEIC, it might also be useful for other English language proficiency exams too. So if you're planning to take a different test, consider watching these videos too. Let's start right away then with my first tip, which is to know the test, the background, the goals, and the structure, for example. TOEIC stands for Test of English for International Communication. The Educational Testing Service, or ETS, is the organization that writes and runs the test. TOEIC is a North American business English exam, but developed primarily in Japan in the 1970s, and it is still a very popular English proficiency test in this country. The purpose of the test is to measure the ability of candidates or test takers to communicate in everyday situations in an English-speaking international working environment. That's a key point to keep in mind about the test. It's for English as a second language rather than English as a foreign language context. This is why the test may appear difficult for English learners who live in a place where English is not spoken very much, but easy, sometimes very easy, for learners who have lived 1 or 2 years in an English-speaking environment on their own. TOEIC has existed for many years, over 30 in fact. Now there are online formats as well, and TOEIC test scores are used by over 10,000 companies, government agencies, and English language learning programs in 120 countries. Several million TOEIC tests are taken in a year, with well over 1 million in Japan alone. TOEIC results are valid for 2 years, but if a required or desired score is not achieved, the test can be retaken in as little as 1 month later to try and get a better score. The TOEIC has 2 parts, the listening and reading test and the speaking and writing test. They're designed to complement each other, but you don't necessarily have to take both. The questions from both are taken from common business and work scenarios, such as sales and marketing, meetings, making appointments, socializing, and business travel. The TOEIC listening and reading test is a paper-based receptive skills test and takes around 2 hours and 30 minutes to complete. 2 hours for the test and another 30 minutes to answer some questions about yourself. There are popular shorter versions of this test for institutions without the final 30-minute section. Because the test questions are all multiple choice, and because listening and reading are what is called receptive language skills, this test will be more about recognition than recall. I explained the difference between recognition and recall in another video if you're not sure about the meaning. Basically, recall tests your ability to bring up something from memory and is a better way to test if you really understand something and can produce it. However, the test is much less expensive if it uses tactics like multiple choice, which is more for recognition. Just keep that in mind. The TOEIC listening and reading test can be easily set up for classes and graded quickly and easily with relatively fast results. Yes, this makes it cheaper and therefore more popular. The listening section is 45 minutes long. There are 100 questions in total, taken in 4 sections. Multiple choice, by the way, just means you have to choose from some possible answers. In this case of the TOEIC, it's usually 4, but sometimes just 3. The listening section includes listening texts. They start simple and gradually become more and more difficult. The first section includes photographic prompts. Next, there are question-response dialogues, a third section including conversations, and finally, short talks. In the last two sections, there are several questions for each conversation or talk. The reading section of the test is 75 minutes long. There are a total of 100 multiple-choice questions here as well. The questions include a mix of gap fills, paragraph completion, and reading comprehension types. As with the listening section, the questions get progressively or gradually more difficult as you work through the test. There are longer passages with many questions for each test closer to the end. The TOEIC reading and listening test gives a score between 10 and 990. Here is a list of what the scores mean. 905 to 990 is international proficiency, which means you can survive without difficulty in just about all contexts in English. You're an advanced learner. 785 to 900 means you have working proficiency plus. You can use English at work without difficulty. You're a high-level intermediate learner. 605 to 780 means you have a limited working proficiency. You can use English at work, but you might have some difficulty. You're an intermediate learner. 405 to 600 is elementary proficiency plus. You're a high-level beginner. 255 to 400 is elementary proficiency. You are a beginner. 185 to 250 means you have memorized proficiency. When you communicate in English, it's based on information you have learned by heart. You may not have a good understanding about what you're saying or writing, let alone what others are saying or writing. 10 to 180 means you have no useful proficiency. You have very little or no ability in English. Okay, now let's move on to the TOEIC speaking and writing test. This test evaluates your productive skills and must be taken online at an official test center, so it might not be as convenient for many people to take. Your answers are digitally recorded and then sent to ETS for marking. The speaking section is 20 minutes long. There are 11 questions included in 6 parts, which are reading aloud, describing pictures, responding to questions using specific information, proposing a solution to a problem, and expressing opinions on a particular topic. These get more difficult as you go through the test, and the end of the test is worth more points. The first 4 task types are rated on a scale of 1 to 3, and the final 2 task types are rated on a scale of 0 to 5. The total of all the scores is converted to an overall score of 0 to 200. The writing section is 60 minutes long. There are a total of 8 questions. For the first 5 questions, you must write sentences about pictures following specific instructions or guidelines. You have to write responses to emails for questions 6 and 7, and the final task is to write a short opinion piece of about 300 words. Just like the speaking section, the reading section gets more difficult as you go through the test. And the end of the section is worth more points. Questions 1 to 5, the first task type, is rated on a scale of 0 to 3. Questions 6 and 7, the second task type, are scored from 0 to 4, and the last task, question 8, is from 0 to 5. Again, the sum of all the scores is then converted to an overall score of 0 to 200. little background about TOEIC. You should know about the two separate tests, their different sections, and scoring. If you've already taken a version of the TOEIC once or twice before, it will look familiar to you, but if you've never taken it before and this video is confusing, don't worry. By doing model or practice tests, you'll become very familiar with the TOEIC anyway. Most practice books you can get on the market have some explanations about the test at the start of the book too. If you practice enough, the structure of the test will gradually become second nature to you, or natural to you, before you attempt or try the real thing. All right, my friends, I'll stop here and hope to give you some more TOEIC tips in upcoming videos. I hope to see you in my next video. Regardless, it might be about TOEIC or something else. Make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe, and be sure to click the notification bell if you want to increase your chances of being reminded by YouTube when I post my next video. MORKSENSEI signing out. Mwah.